Today's meal is a mushroom lasagna with raclette cheese. I'm using a mix of white and brown mushrooms, 2 onions, 2 garlic cloves, a large carrot, and a fennel. I chop the onions first and put it aside. I'm using half a fennel. I remove the tops and the core and give it a rough chop. I chop the garlic cloves and grate the carrot. Finally, I chop all the mushrooms and set everything aside. I take a big pot and add butter and some olive oil. Once the butter is melted, I add in the garlic, onions, and fennel. I cook them for a few minutes before adding the grated carrots. I season everything with a bit of salt before adding in the tomato paste. Then I ensure that the tomato paste and the vegetables cook together for a couple minutes. I mix in a few pinches of dried herbs. After everything is nicely combined, I add the sliced mushrooms. I let the mushrooms release all their liquid. Then I mix in about half a cup of red wine. I let the red wine cook off a bit and then add a quarter cup of flour. Stir until the white streaks from the flour are no longer visible. I add enough water to cover the ingredients. I add a couple spoonfuls of stock powder. The stock powder and water can of course be replaced by broth. Then I add a can of crushed tomatoes and give everything a stir. I season everything with a pinch of salt and a small spoonful of sugar. I let everything cook for about 10 minutes. Once the flavors are melded together, I use a stick blender for a smooth consistency. Then let it rest on very low heat while I make the bechamel sauce. To make the bechamel sauce, I whisk melted butter with flour. I slowly add the milk and whisk continuously to avoid lumps. I alternate between adding a little bit of milk and whisking until I use about 3.5 cups of milk. I add some salt and a few shakes of nutmeg and continue to whisk on medium-high heat. The consistency should be thick, creamy, and lump-free. Now it's time to assemble the lasagna. I first start with a thin layer of tomato sauce, then add the lasagna sheets. After 2 layers of the tomato sauce and lasagna sheets, I add a generous portion of the bechamel sauce. I end the final layer with bechamel sauce. If you have raclette cheese available, I suggest you use this for the cheese layer. Bake the lasagna in the oven for 25 to 30 minutes. The raclette cheese melts beautifully with a crisp and golden edge. Once out of the oven, let the lasagna rest before serving.